The key turned in the lock at 4:52 p.m., and my heart stopped like someone had reached into my chest and closed a fist around it. I was still sitting on the bedroom floor. Wedding photos fanned out around me like evidence at a crime scene I hadn't realized I was standing in. Luke's letter shook in my hand hard enough that the paper made a sound, a dry little whisper, over and over. Written the night before he married me. 6 years old, and I was only now reading it because I'd only just found it, shoved behind a shoebox of ticket stubs in the closet we never opened. I hadn't finished it. Mia, his voice came down the hallway, easy, unbothered, the voice of a man who had no idea his whole life was about to tip sideways. I couldn't move. I couldn't hide the letter. I couldn't even breathe in a way that felt like breathing. For 6 years, I had wondered, quietly at 2 a.m., in the shower, in the middle of conversations with other people, why a man like Luke Bennett had chosen a woman like me. He was 6'2" and built like the outdoor sportswear catalogs he had no idea he resembled. Strangers stared at him in restaurants. Waitresses got flustered. And I was Mia Delgado Bennett, 34 years old, 5'4", the kind of woman people called sweet when they couldn't think of anything else to say. His own mother, Diane, had asked him once, right there in the hallway of his parents' house in Escondido, both of us holding stacks of dinner plates, if he was sure about this relationship. I'd heard every word. I'd stood there smiling like an idiot, pretending the floor hadn't just opened under me. I asked Luke about it in the car that night. He pulled over on Auto Parkway, put the Accord in park, and told me he wasn't going anywhere. I wanted so badly to believe him that I let myself. I buried it. I told myself Diane was just difficult, just protective, just an overbearing mother who thought no one would ever be enough for her son. I told myself a lot of things over the years. I told myself it didn't matter, because Luke proposed on a Tuesday for no reason at all, because Luke married me in a backyard in Fallbrook with string lights and rented folding chairs, because Luke never left my side the 11 months after my sister Renata died in a 2-car accident on Highway 76 when I was 28. For 6 years, our life together looked, from the outside and from most angles on the inside too, like an ordinary good marriage. Luke sold commercial insurance out of an office in Carlsbad and came home smelling like the same drugstore cologne he'd worn since college. I left for Rancho Title and Escrow every morning at 7:40 because I liked getting to my desk before the phone started, before the underwriters started forwarding me the files with the messy chains of title that nobody else wanted to untangle. We had a mortgage on a 3-bedroom house in San Marcos we could actually afford, a golden retriever named Biscuit who ate exactly 1 sock per year like clockwork, and a Sunday routine of farmers market coffee that never once felt like performance. I want to be clear about that because it matters for what comes later. Nothing about those 6 years felt like a woman living inside a con. Luke remembered my co-workers' names. He drove 40 minutes each way to see me through the worst of Renata's funeral arrangements without ever once making it about how hard it was for him. He was, by every ordinary measurement I had, a good husband. That's what made the letter so much worse when it finally surfaced. Not that it revealed a stranger, but that it revealed a stranger folded quietly inside someone I already loved. There had been small things over the years, in hindsight, that I'd filed away without examining. The way Luke's mother sent gifts on Renata's birthday every year without ever being asked to remember the date. The way Luke went quiet, just for a beat, anytime someone mentioned Highway 76 in casual conversation, a beat I'd always attributed to grief by proxy, rather than anything closer to guilt. I'd noticed these things the way you notice a hairline crack in a ceiling, worth a glance, not worth a phone call to a contractor. I stopped waiting for the catch, until today, until the shoebox, until this letter, my name in his handwriting across the front, the ink gone brown with age. If you're reading this, then I didn't have the courage to tell you before we got married. My stomach had dropped the first time I read that line. It dropped harder the second time. There's something about the day we met that I've kept from you. The day we met. The bakery on Grand Avenue in Escondido. The stranger who turned around in line and told me I was beautiful like it cost him nothing. The stranger who asked for my number like it was the easiest thing in the world he'd ever done. It wasn't an accident that I spoke to you in that bakery. My hands had gone numb reading that. 6 years of marriage. 6 years of believing I'd gotten lucky exactly once. And the whole time, something about that ordinary Tuesday morning had been a lie I didn't know I was living inside. Footsteps. Closer now. I didn't look up when he filled the doorway. "What are you doing?" Luke asked, smiling, until his eyes found the paper in my hand. The smile dropped off his face like something had been holding it up and let go. He knew exactly what I was holding. "Where did you find that?" His voice had changed. Careful. Controlled. Scared in a way I had never once heard from him in 6 years. "Mia, baby, what is this?" I held it up so he'd have to look at his own handwriting staring back at him. He let out a breath, slow, like a man bracing for something he'd been outrunning since before we were married. "I can explain." Those 3 words made my chest cave in on itself. "You wrote that meeting me wasn't an accident." It wasn't. Was it a bet? The question came out before I could stop it. "Did someone dare you to talk to me?" His eyes went wide. "What? No. God, no. Never that. Was somebody watching that day? Was I a joke to somebody?" "Mia, no. Never. I need you to hear me on that." "Then explain it. Because right now, every single thing I ever believed about the luckiest day of my life feels like it belongs to somebody else's marriage. It's not what you think." "Then why did you pretend you'd never seen me before?" He took a step toward me. I put my hand up before he could close the distance. "Just tell me the truth." His gaze dropped to the pages scattered across the carpet. Pages I hadn't gotten to yet. "Read the rest, he said quietly. I want it from you, right now, out loud. He sat down across from me on the floor, slower than I had ever seen him move, like 6 years of weight had finally caught up to his knees. I saw you in that bakery before the day I spoke to you. I stared at him. I was there with my mother, Diane. Diane, who never wanted him with me. Diane, who asked if he was sure. Diane, who apparently knew something 6 years before I ever got the chance to. She knew? My voice cracked down the middle. This whole time she knew? Luke didn't answer right away. And in the silence, every insecurity I had spent 6 years burying came roaring up at once, all together, all at the same volume. Luke. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. What did you see that day? What did your mother see? He looked at me like a man handing over something he could never take back. Mia, there's something else. Something I never told you. Not even in that letter. He opened his mouth. My mom knew your sister. I heard the words and understood none of them. What? Renata. My mom knew Renata. The name landed in the room like something dropped from a height. I hadn't heard anyone say my sister's name out loud in months, and hearing it now, in this context from him, made the floor tilt under me. That's not possible, I said. Renata never mentioned your family. Ever. Not once in 28 years. She wouldn't have known my mother by name. Luke's voice had gone flat. The way people talk when they've rehearsed something in their head so many times it no longer sounds like feeling. My mom knew who she was, not the other way around. I need to explain who I was back then, because none of this makes sense unless you understand that I am not, and have never been, a woman who lets things go unchecked. I've spent 11 years as a title examiner at Rancho Title and Escrow in San Diego County, which means I spend my working life pulling chains of title, cross-referencing deed records, and finding the one clerical inconsistency buried in 40 years of paperwork that tells you a property isn't actually clean. It is unglamorous work. It has also made me the kind of person who cannot leave a discrepancy alone. Not in a house record. Not in a marriage. So when my husband told me his mother knew something about my dead sister that I didn't cry. Not yet. I went and got a legal pad. Start over, I said, from the beginning, slowly. Luke rubbed his hands over his face. My mom's cousin owned Bennett and Cole Auto Group, the dealership on Auto Park Way. I know the dealership. Everyone in Escondido knows the dealership. Renata's accident, the one on 76. He said it like it hurt to shape the words. The other car, the one that hit her. My whole body went cold in a single second, the way it does right before you understand something you are not ready to understand. That car came off the Bennett and Cole lot 4 days before the accident, Luke said. It had a known brake defect. There was a recall notice sitting in a filing cabinet at the dealership that nobody had processed. I told myself, sitting there on my own bedroom floor, that I had misheard him. I told myself there was another explanation, a simpler one, because the alternative meant that the family I had married into had some kind of hand in the worst night of my life, and had spent 6 years sitting across from me at Thanksgiving like nothing was owed. You're lying, I said, and my voice didn't even sound like mine. I wish I were. Show me. Mia, show me, Luke, right now, or I swear to God, I am calling someone tonight who can show me instead. He didn't show me that night. He said the paperwork wasn't in the house, that it was in a safe deposit box at Pacific Premier Bank his mother controlled, that he'd only ever seen it once, years ago, before we were even engaged. I told myself I believed there was a safe deposit box. I told myself Diane would produce it if I asked directly, because surely, a woman doesn't sit on something like that for 6 years while eating turkey across from the daughter of the person it happened to. 2 days later, Diane told me to my face that she had no idea what I was talking about. Whatever Luke told you, she said, standing in her own kitchen in a cardigan the color of wet sand. He's confused. He was 22. He doesn't remember things correctly. He remembers a recall notice, I said. He remembers a filing cabinet. He remembers being a young man who wanted to feel important to his girlfriend's tragedy, Diane said, and smiled at me the way she used to smile at me across those dinner plates 6 years ago, right before she asked her son if he was sure about me. I'm sorry about your sister, Mia. I have always been sorry about your sister. That doesn't mean my family did something wrong. I drove home shaking so hard I had to pull into a Rite Aid parking lot on Center City Parkway and sit there for 20 minutes before I trusted myself to keep driving. I told myself Diane was protecting her family's name. Nothing more sinister than that. I told myself even if there had been a defect, defects happen, recalls get missed. It wouldn't necessarily mean anyone did anything on purpose. I told myself this 3 separate times on the drive home and believed it a little less each time I said it. That night I tried, one more time, to fix things the easy way, the way that wouldn't require me to become a different version of myself to get an answer. I asked Luke, calmly, sitting across from him at our own kitchen table, to just call his mother and ask her directly, together, on speakerphone, so there'd be no version of the conversation I hadn't heard with my own ears. He agreed. He dialed. Diane let it ring 4 times and then picked up and told him, in a bright, unbothered voice clearly meant for an audience of one who wasn't me, that she was walking into a hair appointment and could they talk later in the week. She hung up before either of us said anything real. Luke set the phone down on the table between us like it had gotten too heavy to hold, and neither of us said anything for a long time after that. I understood, sitting there, that the easy way wasn't going to work. Diane had 6 years of practice being unreachable to me in exactly this fashion, and she wasn't going to stop now because I'd asked nicely once, with her son on the line. Then I remembered what I actually do for a living. Rancho Title and Escrow has a standing relationship with the San Diego County Recorder mayor's office, and I have a standing relationship with a woman there named Priscilla Ondo, who has worked county records for 19 years and owes me a favor from a title dispute I helped her untangle 2 years ago involving her own mother's house. I need everything filed under Bennett and Cole Auto Group between January and June 11 years ago, I told her over the phone, sitting in my car outside the office instead of going inside, because I couldn't have done this with co-workers walking past my desk. That's a business filing, not a property record. Different database. Can you pull it anyway? Priscilla was quiet for a second. Mia, is this personal? It's my sister, I said, and that was all I had to say. 3 days later, she sent me a scanned NHTSA recall notice, dated 11 years and 4 months ago, for a brake line defect on a specific model year that matched exactly the description of the vehicle that had hit Renata's car on Highway 76. The notice had been issued to dealerships nationwide 6 weeks before the accident. Bennett and Cole's copy had a stamped receipt date on it, meaning someone at that dealership had signed for it, had it in hand 6 weeks before a car matching that exact defect left their lot and killed my sister 4 days after being sold off their floor. I sat in that parking lot and threw up into a plastic Vons bag I kept in the glove box for exactly this kind of emergency, because apparently some part of me had been braced for something like this for longer than I knew. Then I called a lawyer. Nadia Farrow has practiced personal injury and wrongful death law in San Diego for 21 years, and the first thing she told me, sitting across from her desk in a Mission Valley office with a view of absolutely nothing, was that I should not expect an easy answer. Statute of limitations on a wrongful death claim in California is 2 years from date of death, she said. You're 11 years out. If this were a new claim, it would be dead on arrival, so there's nothing. I didn't say that. Nadia pulled up a database on her laptop, turned it so I could see. There was a wrongful death claim filed against Bennett and Cole 11 years ago, settled out of court 4 months after your sister's death. Settlement amount and terms are sealed under a non-disclosure agreement. Filed by who? That's the interesting part. Nadia turned her screen further toward me. It wasn't filed by your family. My blood went cold in my chest. It was filed by the estate of the other driver, she said. The one driving the car with the defect. He died too, Mia. Same accident. Did you know that? I hadn't known that. In 11 years, no one had told me the other driver died. I had spent over a decade believing my sister died because a stranger ran a light, and I had never once looked into who that stranger was, because grief doesn't leave room for curiosity about the person who took something from you. It only leaves room for the hole they left. His name was Everett Cole, Nadia said, reading off the screen. Age 31, and Cole is the same Cole as Bennett and Cole. He was the dealership's junior partner. His estate sued the dealership, his own family's business, for wrongful death, alleging they knew about the brake defect and sold the car anyway. I sat there while every version of the story I had told myself for 11 years quietly collapsed. They settled with their own son's estate to make it go away, Nadia said, which means your sister's death and the death of the man driving the defective car both got absorbed into a settlement that named neither of them publicly. It's likely why you never heard about it. Your family wasn't a party to it. Legally, you had no standing to know. But Diane knew. If Diane Bennett was married into that family at the time or held any ownership stake, she would have been named in the settlement negotiations. Yes, she'd have known. I called Detective Rosa Marine, who had worked the original accident report 11 years ago and was, according to the department directory, still assigned to the CHP San Diego office covering the 76 corridor, 22 years on the force. She remembered the case the moment I said Renata's name, which told me something on its own. Most detectives don't carry an 11-year-old fatal accident report in their head unless something about it stuck. We flagged the brake system in the post-accident inspection, she told me over the phone. It's in the original report. Exhibit C, mechanical findings. We noted the defect matched an open recall. We forwarded that finding to the DA's office for review of potential dealership liability. And nothing came of it that I ever heard. Cases like that, if the civil side settles fast enough and quiet enough, sometimes the criminal referral just stalls. Doesn't mean it disappears. Means nobody pushed it. Can I get a copy of the original report? You're listed as next of kin on file. Yes. While I waited for the report to arrive, I did the thing I always tell junior examiners at Rancho Title never to skip. I built a timeline before I trusted a single document that came in after it. I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and wrote down every date I could verify independently. The recall notice's issue date from Priscilla's file, Renata's date of death from the funeral program I still had in a drawer, the wedding date from our own marriage certificate, the date Diane's husband reportedly died of a heart attack, which Luke confirmed for me over a strained, mostly silent dinner as 4 months after our wedding almost to the day. Laid out end to end like that, the timeline stopped looking like a string of unrelated tragedies and started looking like a single, continuous chain of consequence that nobody had ever laid flat in front of me before. A recall notice arrives. 6 weeks later, a car leaves a lot it should never have left. 4 days after that, my sister is dead. 6 years later, I marry into the family that sold the car. 4 months after the wedding, the man who ran that dealership is dead too. Nobody had lied to me about any single one of these facts in isolation. They had simply made sure I never saw them lined up together. The report arrived 4 days later, and Exhibit C sat there in black and white exactly the way Detective Marine described it. Brake line failure consistent with the manufacturer's active recall, notice of which had been received by the selling dealership prior to the date of sale. Chain of custody on the vehicle's maintenance records showed no service performed between the notice date and the sale date. Someone signed for that recall notice and sold the car anyway. I printed it. I put it in a folder. I drove to Diane's house with the folder on the passenger seat like a passenger of its own. She didn't let me pass the front hallway. "You need to leave," Diane said, one hand still on the door, the cardigan gone, replaced by something sharper in her face than I had ever seen aimed at me directly. "I have the recall notice. I have the accident report. I have the settlement filing with Everett's name on it." I held up the folder. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I could see in her face that she already knew every page inside it. "I know Everett was driving the car that killed my sister. I know his own estate sued you. I know you settled with your dead son's lawyers to keep it out of the papers." Diane's face did something I will remember for the rest of my life, a kind of controlled collapse, like a building coming down inside itself instead of outward. No dust, no noise, just floors quietly giving way one at a time behind a still facade. "Everett was 29 when he took over inventory receiving," she said finally, so quietly I almost lost it to the wind. "The recall notice came in during a week he was out with the flu. Nobody rechecked it when he came back. It sat in a drawer. He sold that car himself 3 weeks later, never having seen the notice at all. That's not an excuse for 11 years of silence. He was my husband's nephew. My husband is dead now too, Mia. Did you know that? Heart attack 6 years ago, 4 months after your wedding. He never forgave himself. Neither did I. You let your son marry into the family of the woman your dealership killed, and you said nothing. I told him to leave you alone," Diane said, and her voice cracked for the first time since I'd known her. "The day I saw you in that bakery, I recognized you from the obituary photo. I begged Luke to walk away, to find someone else, anyone else, because I could not survive watching my family sit across a dinner table from that girl's sister for the rest of my life. Then why didn't he listen?" "Because he'd already spoken to you before I got the chance to stop him," Diane said. "And because once he knew who you were, he told me he wasn't going to be a coward about it. He said the accident wasn't your fault, and it wasn't his, and hiding from you wouldn't undo anything Everett did. He said the only decent thing left to do was tell you everything. Eventually, when it wouldn't destroy you before you'd even had a chance to fall in love." I stood in that hallway holding a folder full of 11 years, and I understood, all at once, that the letter in my hand upstairs at home wasn't a confession of cruelty. It was a confession of cowardice. A man who knew the truth on day one and spent 6 years working up to telling me, and ran out of time before the wedding, and kept running out of time every year after that, until a shoebox in a closet did it for him. That didn't make it forgivable. It made it understandable, which is a much harder thing to sit with. I had 24 hours before I had to decide something, because Nadia Farrow called the next morning with news that changed the shape of everything. The criminal referral detective Maureen mentioned hadn't stalled after all. It had simply been buried under a backlog, and a DA's office paralegal doing a records retention purge had flagged it 3 weeks earlier as an open item nobody had closed. Nadia's contact in the DA's office told her off the record that if a new complainant came forward with the original recall documentation, the statute for the underlying fraud, falsifying maintenance records, which carries a longer limitations period than the wrongful death claim itself, might still be live. "You'd have to decide today," Nadia said. "Tomorrow they close the file for good, purge review or not." I sat at my kitchen table with the recall notice, the accident report, and the settlement filing spread out in front of me the way I'd once spread wedding photos on my bedroom floor. And I thought about my sister, 28 years old, driving home from a shift at Palomar Health where she worked as a labor and delivery nurse, hit by a car with a fixable defect that somebody had been paid to look away from. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, not from fear this time, from something colder and steadier than fear. I called Nadia back at 6:40 p.m. and told her to send the documentation to the DA's office that night. The story broke publicly 9 weeks later, not because I leaked it, but because the San Diego County DA's office filed formal charges against the surviving corporate entity of Bennett and Cole Auto Group for falsification of maintenance and recall records, and court filings are public record the moment they're stamped. A reporter named Devin Okafor, who covers county courts for the Union Tribune, found the filing during a routine docket check and called me for comment. I gave him the recall notice. I gave him the accident report. I did not give him Diane's name in any personal capacity, because by then some strange, exhausted part of me still didn't want to be the reason a grieving mother's face ended up in the newspaper, even a mother who had let me live inside a lie for 6 years. The paper printed the story anyway because a dealership doesn't get charged with falsifying federal recall compliance records without every name attached to the corporate filings becoming public regardless of what I wanted kept private. Bennett and Cole Auto Group's remaining ownership, Diane held a minority stake she'd inherited from her late husband, dissolved the business within the month rather than face the exposure of a trial. The California DMV opened a separate compliance review into the dealership's service department that resulted in the revocation of 2 service technician certifications for records they'd falsified years after Everett Cole ever touched the drawer. None of it brought Renata back. I want to be honest about that, because I think stories like this one like to pretend justice fills the hole. It doesn't. It just proves the hole was real, and that matters matters, but it isn't the same thing as healing. Luke and I are still married. I want to say that plainly, because I know it isn't the ending people expect, and I've stopped worrying about what people expect. We went to a marriage counselor named Dr. Priya Nair, who has practiced couples therapy in San Diego for 14 years, for 8 months after the letter. The first 4 months mostly, I sat in her office and asked Luke, in a dozen different ways, why he married me knowing what he knew. He never had a better answer than the one he gave me on my bedroom floor, that he'd fallen in love with me before he ever worked out how to tell me the truth, and every year that passed made the telling feel more impossible instead of less, until it wasn't a decision anymore, just a debt quietly accruing interest. I don't know if that's a good enough reason. I know it's the true one. What I know for certain is this: the marriage I have now is not the marriage I thought I had for 6 years. It's smaller in some ways. I don't believe in easy luck anymore, in strangers who turn around in bakery lines for no reason at all. But it's more honest than it's ever been, because there's nothing left in a shoebox that either of us hasn't already said out loud. Diane and I don't speak. I don't think we will again. I've made a kind of peace with that too. Renata would have laughed, I think, at how long it took a title examiner to finally read the fine print on her own life.